How's it going, guys? TJ Bennett here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be looking at loops. First, let's go over last week's homework assignment. If you want to skip reviewing the homework assignment, you can jump to this timestamp here. The homework assignment was to create a vending machine app that met the criteria that I listed. There are many ways to completing this homework assignment. This is just one way. First, let's declare what variables we want to use in the program. We will have a store credit, cost of tacos, number of tacos, total cost, and taco selection. That'll be our int variables. As for bool, we'll have is valid purchase and is valid selection. Let's greet the customer, tell them how much store credit they have, and display a list of items with prices. Now you'll notice I have console.writeLine with just quotations. This is to add a space between showing the credit and the menu. The approach we'll have for user selection is to have a number associated with each item. We'll then ask the user to type in the selection number for the taco they would like to purchase. Let's use our isValidSelection bool variable with int tryparse and assign the successful int value result to taco selection. Now that we have logic that tells us if the user typed in a number, we can now use an if statement to do a condition check. First, we can simplify this condition check by removing the equals true. When using a bool variable in an if statement, it'll identify as true unless it has an exclamation point in front of it. This would read if isValidSelection equals to false. Let's use if isValidSelection equals true and then add an else statement when it doesn't equal true. So just to recap, int.tryparse is going to take whatever the user types in and try to assign it to being a number. If it's not a number, then isValidSelection will be false. If it is a number, then isValidSelection will be true, and taco selection will be assigned the result of that number. So if it is a valid selection, it'll run our purchase logic. If it's not a valid selection, it'll read invalid selection, exiting the program. We can add multiple conditions to an if statement as well. The first condition operator we'll look at is double pipes. Double pipes basically is the OR operator. So this will read isValidSelection or taco selection is less than 5. This is the AND operator. It's double ampersands. And basically this will read taco selection less than 5 and taco selection greater than 0. Now let's ask the user how many tacos they'd like to buy. We'll use our bool variable isValidPurchase with the int.tryparse that takes user input, and if they type in a number, it'll assign isValidPurchase to true and it'll assign the number to number of tacos. Next, let's create an if statement with our isValidPurchase. So if they type in a number, isValidPurchase will be true. If they type in not a number, it'll go into this else statement, which will say invalid selection, exiting the program. Now just to recap, in our display, we have a selection number 1 for chicken taco, selection number 2 for beef taco, selection number 3 for vegetable taco, and selection number 4 for shrimp taco, and we have a price next to each one. They're all the same except for shrimp taco. It costs $3 instead of $2. Here we ask the user to type in the selection number for which taco they want to buy. So now that we have the taco selection and we ask how many tacos they want to buy, now let's check which selection the user made. We can accomplish this by using an if statement. If taco selection equals 1, the cost of the tacos was 2, so the total cost would be number of tacos times the cost of tacos. Now we can just copy and paste this 3 more times. And then update the taco selection so each number is covered. Now the taco selection for 4 was shrimp tacos, and the cost of it wasn't $2, it actually was 3. So now that we have the total cost, we can reference the store credit and see if they have enough credit to cover their cost. We can create an if statement. With this if statement, we can check to see if total cost is less than or equal to store credit. If that's true, then let's deduct the total cost out of store credit and tell the customer, purchase successful, you have however much store credit remaining, and thank you for shopping. If the total cost exceeds their store credit, then it will write insufficient funds, thank you for shopping. Now let's run this code and see what it looks like. Welcome to TJ's Tacos. You have $20 credit available. See, here we have our selection, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have the prices, 2, 2, 2, 3, and our different types of tacos. Type in the selection number for the taco you would like. Let's get shrimp tacos. So I'm going to type in 4. How many tacos would you like to buy? Let's say 3 tacos. Purchase successful. You have $11 remaining. Thank you for shopping. Now let's run it again and type in some gibberish. So type in the selection number you would like, blah, blah, blah. Invalid selection as exiting the program. And then let's type in a valid selection and then gibberish. Invalid selection as exiting the program. This was a challenging homework assignment, and if you completed it, you're well on your way of becoming a distinguished programmer. Now let's look at loops. The first loop we'll look at is a while loop. A while loop will run continuously while the condition is being met. Let's create a bool variable called isValidCondition and assign it to be true. The syntax for a while loop will look like this. While, parentheses, and then you can put in your condition, isValidCondition, close parentheses, and then open close curly brace. If you don't create a way of exiting a while loop, you will enter an infinite loop. Infinite loops will break your program, so make sure you implement a way to exit a while loop. In our while loop, let's create a way to gather user input, and we'll display a message to the user to type in the number 1 to exit the loop. Then below where we capture the user input, we can create an if statement. To exit the loop, we just need to change isValidCondition from true to false. Then once we've exited the loop, we'll display a message. Now, when we run this code, type in the number 1 to exit the loop. Let's type in the number 2. Type in the number 1 to exit the loop. Let's type in number 3. Type in the number 1 to exit the loop. So we'll type in the number 1. You have exited the loop. So basically, it'll just keep looping through this logic until the condition, isValidCondition, equals to false. Condition values in a while loop aren't restricted to just bools. You can also use string values, and you can also use number values. For example, if we have an int loop count and assign it to 0, and if we say while loop count is less than 5, and then we can increment loop count by 1. So we can say loop count equals loop count plus 1. There is an easier way of writing this syntax. Instead of saying loop count equals loop count plus 1, if you're just incrementing something by 1, instead of writing this, you can just write loop count plus plus, semicolon. This will take the value and add a 1 to it. Now let's put a console.writeLine in the while loop and see how many times it loops. And now let's run this code. So we can see here, while the loop count is less than 5, to write the loop count and then to increment loop count plus plus. So it said loop 0, loop 1, loop 2, loop 3, loop 4, and once loop count got to 5, it basically became an invalid condition and broke out of the while loop. If you know how many times you need to loop, using a while loop isn't the best practice. Instead, you would want to use a for loop. The for loop syntax will look like this. For, parentheses, and here you would declare your variable. The best practice is to use int I. Int I equals 0, semicolon. Then next is the condition. So we can say while I is less than 5, semicolon, and then here you write the iteration. So we'll say I plus plus, meaning continue to loop and add 1 to I in every loop. We close the parentheses and do open close curly brace. Now we can take this console writeLine loop, but instead of displaying loop count, we'll just display I. And to keep them separated, we'll add a console.writeLine here. Now let's run this code. See, both loops have the same output, but this is 6 lines of code, and this is 4 lines of code. For loops are especially powerful when you use them with an array. I'll show you an example of code and use a for loop and an array to simplify it. Here we have 5 int variables, price 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, each with different values. And here we have console.writeLinePrice and displays each price. Now as you continue programming, you'll develop an eye for clean code. The goal is to express logic using the least amount of code possible. We can accomplish 5 different prices into a single variable we'll call prices. To make this variable contain multiple values, we need to make it an array. To make it an array, you just need to add square brackets next to the data type. When you assign the values, you'll use equal sign, and then curly brace, and then the values separated by commas. When we go to display each price, instead of saying price 1, we can say prices, square brackets, and then in the square brackets, you would type in a number that represents which value you're trying to use. When we look at the values of prices, we see that the first number is 10, the second number is 15, the third number is 35, the fourth number is 50, and the fifth number is 100. But in programming, you count by starting with 0. So to get the first value, 10, instead of typing 1, we actually would type 0. And let's replace these other prices too. So even though there are 5 values here, we have to start counting at 0. And when we run this code, the output will be the same. So instead of declaring each price as its own variable, we were able to create an array of prices and assign it those values. It takes some practice to get used to this way of counting, but the sooner you learn, the better. Now that we've covered arrays, let's use a for loop to simplify displaying these prices. We'll start by declaring an int I integer equals 0. And then if I is less than 5, to keep looping and increment I by 1. We can access each value of prices by putting in a number here, but something special is if we put I here, since I will be 0 when it first loops through, and when it increments I will be 1 and loops through, it actually will increment through each price and display it until I equals 5. When we run this code, it has the same output. We turn 10 lines of code into 5 lines of code. If you've made it this far, great job and keep up the great work. Before we wrap up, I need to show you how to debug your program. There is a way of pausing the program so you can look at the values of your variables. You simply click next to the line number to set a breakpoint. If we set a breakpoint here in the loop, we can actually pause the program each time it iterates and look at the value of I. So when we run this program, you can use your mouse to hover over I and see that I equals 0. At the bottom you can see where it says autos and it has the variable name I with the value of 0. And if we hit continue at the top, we can see that I now equals 1, I equals 2, and I equals 3. This is pausing here because the breakpoint is stopping the program as it hits its breakpoint in each loop iteration. You can also press F11 or this button right up here, and you can step through each line of code as it's being executed. I do encourage you to practice using the debugger. It's essential for fixing bugs in your program. The homework assignment is to take your vending machine app and revise the display to use a for loop and arrays. Then use a while loop to make the program repeat itself unless the user selects to exit the program or if they run out of store credit. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.